He's on his way now to Oakland for game number 6. He joins us this morning. Jared, good morning.
Good morning, DA. Wonderful. I love that you prefaced me with wonderful.
I do actually think you're wonderful at what you do, and I do actually enjoy our sparring sessions, and I do really respect your thoughts on things. So I want to ask you, honestly, do you think Nick Nurse messed up calling that timeout as the Raptors led by 6, had all that momentum with 3:05 to play and possession?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. You know, Nick Nurse justified it last night by saying it was a use it or lose it timeout. It's part of the whole new game format that the NBA has been evolving to over the course of the last couple of years, where they try and acquiesce to the average sports fan who has not been happy with how long it takes to play the final few minutes of an NBA game.
And I've liked that alteration. I like that.
Right. So, you know, ultimately, not only are they trying to speed up the game, that's not even the big part of it. It's the game flow that's a bit of a problem, the start and the stop. And Nick Nurse had that timeout in his pocket that he wouldn't have been able to carry over to the final few minutes of the game if he didn't use it. Was it a little bit of overcoaching? Maybe trying to get a read of a team and understanding that. But I also think, you know, at certain times you want to make sure your defense is set. And at the other hand, you argue, well, this is the best defense in basketball right now. Do you need to make sure for that next possession when you guys get back on defense that you have a game plan for it? Do you not already have that? So maybe I think that'll be examined. But ultimately, listen, let's be clear. There was a lot more that happened in that game that led to the Raptors losing than just that one time, maybe ill-advised timeout.
You're right, because after that, I didn't mind the stoppage of play if after that the Raptors came out highly organized, had good possessions, were disciplined on defense, etc. The problem was they melted down after that on offense, especially. Those possessions out of the timeout were terrible. Isn't that really what we should point?
Let's also look at this, too. Like, DeMarcus Cousins tried to do everything in his power to ham against
no
the Raptors,
question.
right?
No question.
A couple of goaltending calls, a terrible moving screen call. You know, I had this conversation with my producer last night on NBA TV where, you know, people in the truck wanted to look at the numbers and say DeMarcus Cousins had a good game. DeMarcus Cousins nearly cost the Warriors an NBA title last night with the way he played over the final half of the fourth quarter.
Yes. How to explain how poorly, though, the offensive possessions were for the Raptors in the final 3 minutes?
Well, I think, you know, to a certain extent, what you get with a team and a player like the Raptors with Kawhi is, you know, you always are wondering when he's going to erupt, because he was atrocious. Had 14 points heading into the fourth quarter, and then you know, was tremendous down the stretch where I think he was 5 of 9 in the fourth quarter alone, in that one stretch where he scored 10 straight points for the Raptors. You know, you're just waiting for that to happen, and ultimately it does. And I think as good of a team as the Raptors are, and heck, the Warriors have been guilty of this with Kevin Durant at times, and even with Steph Curry at times, you get caught watching your own guy or waiting for your own guy to do it. And then once Kawhi is such a team guy where he's like, I'm not going to force a play, and the double team comes over to him on that last possession, he's going to swing the ball and make the right play. Were the guys ready for it? I don't know. You know, and I'm not here to, you know, trying to place blame on any one individual player, but I think ultimately we saw the Warriors, who have been pretty bad defensively throughout this series, actually come up with their best defensive possession of the entire NBA Finals when it counted most.
Yep, I agree. Jared Greenberg joins us from NBA TV. Now he's shifting back to Oakland for game number 6. The Kevin Durant injury. I was very skeptical that he was going to play last night. I did not assume he was going to play, and I thought if he did play, it might be 15 minutes, very short leash. They were going to be super careful. Let's start here. Were you surprised that he started and played as much as he did in the first quarter?
So I was surprised that he played. I think it's crazy. You know, we're all hearing different things leading up to him ultimately getting the green light to play, and a lot of it was like polar opposite stuff, and it seemed so weird. Like, some people were adamant that there's no chance this guy can play. He's not ready. It's too short of a time frame. And then there's others who continue to leave the door open. And the thing that always made me scratch my head about how the Warriors handled this is, as much drama as surrounded their team, Steve Kerr, for the most part, has a track record of wanting to minimize those distractions. And I was very confounded or dumbfounded, I should say, by the fact that Kerr continued to leave the door open that Durant would play when yet others within the organization were willing to think that he was done. Now, maybe those people weren't privy to enough information. Maybe those people weren't qualified to speak on it. But it just didn't make sense to me that Steve Kerr wouldn't shut down the possibility to end those distractions of the daily questions to Kerr, to the other players, the constant wondering of whether he'd come back when we should be focusing on the other parts of the guys who are playing. And yet they never did that. So I was confused that he did play because I felt like, he wasn't going to be ready. But then ultimately you saw him in warm-ups. You saw him the first few minutes of the game. He looked fantastic. And maybe the Warriors got a little greedy. But ultimately, this is one of those where, this is where I hate the whole, load management conversation because, yes, you decrease and lessen the risk of injury by reducing minutes and playing time. But ultimately, what Kevin Durant did, if he would have sat and only played 7 minutes in the first half as opposed to 12, he could have done it in the first minute of the third quarter and playing his 8th minute. So who knows?
It did feel as though, and I don't know, this is an outside read, it did feel as though the Warriors had mounting pressure on whether he will or won't he play in this series. And I don't know if that was mounting pressure internally from Kevin because he felt like he was letting his guys down. I don't know if that was coming from the front office because they knew that Kevin was potentially going to leave in the offseason, so we better use him right now because we're going to lose him anyway. Or if that was organizationally, is he really that injured? I mean, it's just a calf strain. He's been out for a full month. But to your point, the fact that they never had a cemented kind of plan on this made it feel like it was constantly a state of confusion. And that's very kind of un-Warrior-like, isn't it?
No question. I'll, from my perspective, I will disagree slightly that I didn't feel the pressure was on the Warriors. I felt the pressure was on Kevin Durant. And that's a lot of what I wondered about the expediting the process to get him back on the court. And there was a very curious story written by a very credible writer, Sam Amick of The Athletic the other day, where people within the organization were wondering why he wasn't on the court. And here's my thing. Whether those were justified thoughts by people who were around Durant or not, the bottom line is this. Kevin Durant has showed us time and time again that he cares what people think about him. And again, this is not to justify, this is not to criticize or critique. It is just to state what we have observed, and that is Kevin Durant often responds when people are critical of him or question him. And I just hope that we ultimately don't find out that one of the reasons why they pressed to get back on the court was because Kevin Durant was concerned about the public pressure that he was soft. I don't believe that is true. I am not saying that is true. I'm not reporting that to be true. But you just have to wonder how much the perception of how Kevin Durant looked by not being on the court during what is coming here in the coming weeks had to do with what happened last night.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even if it wasn't Kevin Durant responding to outside perception, if Kevin Durant cares that much about how he's viewed, he would care about internal perception. And that story that you mentioned by Sam Amick, if there was bubbling questions within the organization of, is he really injured? Would other guys play? Is he protecting himself because of free agency? He might have forced his way back onto the floor in response to that pressure, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, I don't even know in this case. And again, we all are speculating. We had no idea. But I would say it was more of the internal conversations rather than the external conversations. Because remember, what was running coincide with Durant's injury was Klay Thompson's injury, Kevon Looney's injury, Andre Iguodala's dealing with an injury, Sean Livingston has mounting injuries. All of this was happening, and all of those guys continued to either they missed a short period of time and came back to play or played through it. And again, each injury is different and unique, and none should ever be compared to one another. But the bottom line is those guys were playing and Kevin Durant wasn't, and stories were starting to pop up. The guys were growing frustrated, and I believe the word was irritated that Sam Amick wrote, that they didn't know what was going on. The thing I can't believe, having covered every game of this finals and being at every of the media availabilities, is just how annoying it must be for the Warriors because Kevin Durant still has not been made available once to the media. So nobody has spoken to Kevin Durant on the record. And at the same time, we continue to always interview all these other players and coaches and staff members, and all we care about is Kevin Durant. So we're not even talking about the dynasty, the possibility of winning 3 in a row, what this means for people's legacies. No, we're talking about why isn't your best player playing, and when do you think he will play? And I have to imagine that grew tiresome to guys within that locker room.
Phenomenal point. I kept thinking that. I said, boy, we're seeing a real ability for all these players to stay cool and to stay calm, because who wouldn't just explode and say, Kevin's not playing, I don't know, I don't have the answer, stop asking me about this, because it was just incessant. Let me ask you to play pop psychologist here on Bob Myers as Jared Greenberg from NBA TV joins us. He was on the verge of tears after the game. Why do you think discussing Kevin's injury was so emotional for Bob?
I think we forget that people are human beings, right? And I think that as much as they want to tell you they care about other human beings, and it's just basketball and there's more important things. Listen, Bob Myers is well aware of all that's involved here, right? He understands the totality of what happened last night. That a guy who is now probably become and earned the right to be called the best player in the world is now not only not going to have a chance to not play for an NBA title this year, but he's probably also going to miss all of next season. And I think that, whether you believe Bob Myers is concerned about whether they made the right decision or whether there was some negligence on what they did, or whether it was just the fact of the matter is Bob Myers saw firsthand in the locker room a grown-ass man who is the best athlete in the world just absolutely have a breakdown and was very emotional himself because of what happened. I think that affects you. And if you are not if you don't allow yourself or allow other people to be captured by the moment and understand how devastating that is. Like I've said this before, and I just alluded to it a bit, but let me just dig in here for a second. We're human beings. And when you see a man, no matter how much money he has, no matter how much success he has on his resume, when a man suffers an injury that's going to take him out of what he does for probably the next year, if that doesn't affect you emotionally and make you think or feel sorry for him, then I don't know what that says about you as a person.
Do you think that front offices pulled their Kevin Durant offers off the table last night?
No. And I think it's absolutely absurd to think that Kevin Durant, by playing last night and ultimately getting injured, cost himself a penny. I think all 30 teams and any team that has the ability to offer Kevin Durant the most amount of money that's legally they're allowed to by the collective bargaining agreement will offer him every single one of those pennies and try and do everything that's legally allowed to get him on their team, even knowing that he more than likely will not be able to play all of next season.
Okay, this is really interesting because so many players that have suffered Achilles injuries not only sit out that following year, but are never quite the same. Why do you think that
none of those players are in the mix for best player of the world at the time of the injury, nor were they 31 years old. A lot of these, listen, Rudy Gay's a guy who's coming off of one right now who's, not necessarily considered old, but a lot of those guys that we want to focus to or go to who we know have had those injuries over time have been later in their career and were not in the prime of who they are. I know that there will be doubts about Kevin Durant returning to that status as the best player in the world when he comes back, whether it's 10 or 12 or longer months or maybe even shorter. But the bottom line is today's NBA, you need a guy like Kevin Durant to give yourself a chance to win an NBA championship. I mean, let's just look at this, DA. I mean, we've been talking so much about how it was just a foregone conclusion that the Warriors are going to win the championship because of who they have. Kevin Durant is out, and the Warriors may lose a title because they don't have him. There are plenty of teams for a variety of reasons. A lot of them are basketball, but a lot of them are also recruiting and branding and awareness and marketing. They want a guy like Kevin Durant on their roster, even if he can't play for the first year.
Being inside that arena, did you cringe when Raptors fans initially cheered the injury?
I did. I'd like to say it was a heat of the moment type of thing, and we all make bad reactionary mistakes in life. But I also say this about Raptor fans: I'm not so sure that there's been a better group of fans throughout these playoffs. I mean, building has been incredible. The fan support has just been tremendous. When Barack Obama was in the building the other night for Game 2, the fans, who are Canadian, by the way, and your producer, by the way, forgot that the Raptors play in a different country.
Nice.
When he called me today, he's like, "Why are you going through customs? I don't understand why you have to do that." That's what happens when you go to a different country.
Not surprising.
But when Barack Obama was in the building, they were chanting MVP, and you got to recognize that a large percentage of the people who were in that building, probably upwards of 80% of people in that building don't have the ability to vote for president of the United States, right? Like, so just like things that have happened with this fan base has just been absolutely tremendous. And last night was a black eye. That was a moment they wish they got back, but I would, let's say, not hold that against them for a long time.
Well, and you would know better than I. I thought the reaction changed pretty quickly once they kind of understood the severity of the situation.
Right, and give Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka, Danny Green credit for quieting the crowd down, and then there started to be some KD chants, people trying to make up for their error. Like, they realized it really quickly.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a bloodthirsty crowd that wanted Kevin Durant to have a season-ending injury or a next season-ending injury. It just felt like in the heat of the moment, this could help our team. And then once they realized the significance of it and took the cue of their players, they kind of personally course-corrected. And so thus, I can't criticize the Raptors fans.
No question. I'm with you on that.
Jared Greenberg joining us this morning on the show from NBA TV. This is nice. We could actually do a segment without fighting with one another.
I kind of prefer the other way around, to be honest with you.
All right. So
I was, to be honest with you, I was a little nervous about that today because in the past I've had to do it from NBA arenas where I could walk away from people. I was wondering if security here at the airport in Canada, I was risking missing my flight if you and I really got into it. They're like, I'm not letting that drunk idiot get on the plane. Look at him just screaming at people on the phone.
Yeah, detained at the Toronto airport because he joined the DA show. So, okay, so next time we have you on, I will cook up some type of argument between us. It'll be like First Take.
Thank you. Could we do some geography with Mraz?
Yeah. Mraz had no idea Toronto wasn't in America. Well, he thought that Boise was a 2-hour drive past Cleveland. So.
Yeah. Yep.
Check out Jared Greenberg daily on NBA TV for all the latest on the NBA Finals. Thanks, bud.